Welcome to In Transition, a program dedicated to the practice of content marketing in government. Here's your host, David Pembroke.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name's David Pembroke, and thanks for joining us in Transition, the podcast dedicated to the practice of content marketing in government. I'm pleased to be here once again as we bring you the insights and wisdom of some of the most interesting people in the world of content marketing in government. Today, a real treat. We speak to an award-winning Australian government communications advisor. But before we do that, it's definition time. Content marketing is a strategic and measurable business process that relies on the creation, curation, and distribution of valuable, relevant, and consistent content to engage and inform a clearly defined audience with the objective of driving a desired citizen or stakeholder action. So to today's guest, it's Jo Scard, and she's the founder of the communication agency 50 Acres. Jo has played a number of roles, including as a senior advisor to the Australian federal government for over a decade. She also worked as a communication strategist in London, as a journalist for ITV, Associated Press, the Seven Network, SBS, the ABC and Fairfax. In 2013, Jo was named a finalist in the inaugural NAB Women's Agenda Rural and Regional Entrepreneur of the Year Award, and was also nominated for the 2013 and 2014 Telstra Businesswoman of the Year Awards. And recently, Jo was awarded the Government Relations Practitioner of the Year at the Government Relations Summit. Congratulations, Jo, on winning that very prestigious award, and thanks very much for being on In Transition.
Thank you for having me.
When they gave you the award, when you reflected on that, why do you think they gave Jo Scard that award?
I think for a couple of reasons. We've had, since we set up 5 years ago, I suppose quite phenomenal growth. It was me and a laptop and my kitchen table and 4 clients when I first set up 5 years ago. And, you know, in that space of time, we've had close to a 500% growth in income, or, you know, not just turnover, but income. And so I suppose it reflects, you know, and that growth doesn't happen, you know, because you do nothing. It happens because people come back to work with you and like what you do. And essentially, in government relations terms, which is not all of what we do, but it's about half of what we do as an agency, it means delivering for them, you know, in government relations terms, it means, you know, putting their objectives to government, you know, getting some wins on the board, getting them new funding, you know, influencing an agenda, changing policy, or whatever it is that you're trying to prosecute. So, you know, it ultimately means that we've done something right, I hope. And I think that's probably reflected in the award. And the fact that we're quite an innovative agency in the way we work, which I think people really find interesting about us. We're a virtual agency. We are real people, but we do exist, but we don't have an office. So we all work from where we live or in co-working spaces. And as a consequence, that's a great way of keeping some overheads down, but also just being an innovative, flexible workplace.
Yeah, I'm really interested to explore that later in the interview, because I think this notion of distributed workforces and gathering people from wherever they might be, it doesn't have to be in Australia, it could be anywhere, but being able to draw down that expertise to apply to a particular issue, problem, challenge, whatever it might be, I think it's really going to be the future, and I think you're really heading the way there, certainly in this part of the world.
Absolutely. I've got someone who lives in a remote Indigenous community in the Northern Territory. She's not Indigenous, but she just happens to be living there with her partner, and she writes our websites. So, you know, we do that now, and it's absolutely, you're absolutely right.
So just before that, let's go back to some of those problems that you're solving and when people are coming to you, and just exactly how you are using content and using content marketing to help them to achieve those objectives.
Well, you know, people come to us with a range of problems. Some people say we want to overcome this particular loggerhead of issues as some sort of impasse that we've got with a particular policy or political problem, and they're either working, by themselves or in collaboration with other companies or not-for-profits or organisations to influence that agenda, to try and change that. And that's a very common problem. Sometimes people have very particular needs, so that they need to amend a piece of legislation with something very minor, which has a sort of a broader agenda, obviously, but it's a particular niched sort of action they need rather than a sort of a big picture policy issue. And then some people really just want to engage with government in a broad sense as sort of future-proofing, if you like, and saying, well, if we talk to them now before we have a problem, that's the best course of action, and that's absolutely our mantra, that the best time to talk to government is when you don't have a problem, so that when you have a problem you can go back to them and you've established some connections. In terms of using content marketing, well, we do that in a whole range of ways. We're working with clients. It's not just about face-to-face engagement with politicians, because that's only one part of what you do. It's about trying to influence an agenda in a whole range of ways. So that might be through, online distribution of material, through, EDMs, marketing emails, through e-kits to politicians, to, social media platforms, the most appropriate ones given the situation. It might be, really, I suppose, doing an e-blast in some way or other. So, online is a really key tool for us to distribute content on whatever it is and sort of try and galvanise and generate interest in whatever it is we're doing. The other way, of course, is, your classical sort of traditional media, but media is no longer traditional, really, and it's very untraditional in many respects now, because if you think about your own consumption, not many people are just reading a newspaper any longer. People are getting information from all sorts of ways. And so, it's about giving people content for online use. Even mainstream newspapers will take content from you and photos. So it's about thinking, what can we do with what we want to talk about, and how can we package that in a whole range of ways? How can we package that content in a whole range of ways that will work and resonate with all of those different audiences that we're trying to influence with this particular problem?
So in terms of your process, can you give us a bit of an outline as to how you would go about solving one of these problems using all the various tools that you've just outlined? Sure.
Well, the first thing you need to do when you sit down with the client is obviously have a discovery session with them and, really unearth what the issue is. And, often people want to do more than they think they need to, or more than they actually need to. There's, you don't often need to do every single thing on your shopping list. And then we will, depending on the sort of imperative of it, sometimes it's something you have to hit the ground running, but often you've got a week or two where you can prepare some strategic guidance or an overview strategy and a whole lot of recommendations about activities, and so we'll recommend all of those things. A strategy or a strategy plan, or obviously depending on the nature of the project. And then we obviously, work with the client on that, make sure that they're on board and they're along for the ride, because it's absolutely imperative that they are. You don't just plonk down a strategy and say, this is what we're doing, and off we go. They've got to be on board for it and understand the reasons that you're suggesting all of these different courses of action. And then we work with them to create all of that content, whether that's, delivering messages to politicians in the meetings, whether that's delivering op-eds or other content to online platforms or other platforms, whether it's delivering, messages through social media or any other types of ways, direct EDM marketing or whatever that is. So we work with the clients and then we get feedback from how that's working. So if we get a lot of take-up in one way or the other, we'll look at that and go, okay, that's working. Let's think about how we can do that again. If something else fell flat, well, we think, was there a reason for that? Let's go back and have a look at that. And, could we do it better? Could we change direction? So it's obviously about reviewing what you're doing along the way. It's not a static process. So making sure that, the clients are there and along with you for that process.
Just how important is it, the development of the strategy component and following the strategy?
Look, strategies are there, but, we've all worked with people, clients and projects where, clients want a huge, big strategy and they, for whatever internal purposes or whatever it is, and they want something that's got, 63 matrices attached and 23 spreadsheets and 129 recommendations. And that's all well and good, and you can always produce that sort of document. But if that doesn't work, unless it's actually can be practically delivered, or unless they're going to act on it, because there's no point in developing a strategy for something or for someone or an organisation or a company if they're not going to do anything about it. So I think you've got to gauge very quickly when you first interact with them, what are they going to do? What do they need? What will they use? What's going to work for them? What's within their gift in terms of budgets, in terms of resourcing? What's manageable? And I'm not saying that you don't take them out of that comfort zone and stretch them and push them. You do, and you do that in terms of sort of activities that they might do. But you've also got to be very mindful if you're working with a peak body or an organisation or a not-for-profit, that it's something that they can actually staff and they can actually resource. Is there budgets to do it? So, there's no point in suggesting that you get a skywriter to write someone's name in the sky if they can't afford it, So, you've got to think about what they can do and what they can't do. And I think that's pivotal to that strategy. Once you've got a strategy, the strategy's there as a bedrock. But, of course, we're working in a creative industry. So, creative industries are about being fleet of foot, responding to the immediacy of what someone's asking or telling you or wanting. And so those strategies need to be adapted and worked around. And that's not to say you throw out the baby with the bathwater and go, we've got a strategy, that's great, that was excellent, but now we'll just do what we feel like. It's a bit of both, really. You've got to work within it and with it, because you've created it for a good reason. It exists for a reason. But you've also got to, if the journalists are all saying to you, those 3 story ideas which we thought were going to be crackers, they're just not working. You've got to think about plan B, because, if you just push ahead with plan A might not get you anywhere. With online content, you can have an advertising campaign and, it might go absolutely marvellously. But at the same time, it may not be getting any hits at all, or not the sort of hits you're expecting. So you've got to review that and think, what can we do better? How can we change?
And in terms of that agile approach, that ability to test and learn and to pivot, in the main, how comfortable are your clients that you're dealing with that, you may have to change, that you may have to adapt, that you may have to be able to try something that you didn't anticipate? Do you find that they're comfortable when you come back to them and suggest, look, we're going to have to move on this, we're going to have to change?
Yes, by and large, yes. There's some organisations that are different. Every organisation has a different culture, and you deal with that culture. It's part of the role of being a consultant. We all have had those experiences. But by and large, I think they come to you because you've got a set of expertise that they don't have. And they're looking to you to provide that knowledge. And so they're not just sort of going to give up complete control and involvement with the issue and with the process. But I think they are looking for guidance. They are looking for that leadership. And so I think if you can bring the client with you, I really, there's been, yes, I've been a consultant now for 16 years professionally, both with this company and a previous consultancy where I worked for 10 years. And yes, we've all had instances where we've had an objective, and it's had twists and turns. Sometimes that's because the clients asked for it to change, and you realise that the agenda that you started with at the beginning now doesn't look like anything like it was or was meant to be. But sometimes you've got to go with that. Sometimes it's internal politics. Sometimes it's demands, budgetary demands, political, all sorts of reasons, and you've got to go with that. And ultimately what I do is I, look them in the face and I say, well, look, I think we need to do this, and I understand what you're asking, but, fundamentally I think we probably need to stick to our guns. We need to, steer straight ahead and push through with that agenda. We decided on that for a good reason, for these reasons, and appreciate why you now want to do something different. But, I think we really need to have a look at that. Because, being a consultant, you've got to be diplomatic. You can't just slap people over the face and go, you're wrong. It doesn't work. No one wants to be told that. You've got to have a good bedside manner. Otherwise, there's no point in being in the business, really. And so you've got to bring people along with you, really. Otherwise, I don't think you're a good consultant if you can't bring people with you. Fundamentally, it's like being in politics. I mean, a lot of people who work in government relations, as you know, are former government advisors, and I was one of those. And if you're a politician, they're not all perfect, but fundamentally, they all should have a good bedside manner. Some of them have better bedside manners than others, but, they should be able to bring people along for the ride. And I think that's one of the skills that we should have.
What's your advice to a government agency or a government department in how to get the best out of a relationship with a consultant such as yourself?
Well, I've done a lot of work with government agencies and departments. One of the ways that we've adopted, and I think it's worked really well, is we've found that we go into projects and there's, I suppose, an expectation that there will be something produced, whatever that is, and it's generally something that they can't do or they don't have the skills to do for whatever reason at that time. And so, we've worked on very large strategies, we've worked on very large documents, we've worked on annual reports, we've produced films, we've done all sorts of stuff. And I think one of the ways that I've dealt with that process is to make sure that they are absolutely with you from the beginning. And there was one particular agency that we had to prepare a very large strategy for, and they had engaged a consultancy just 6 months before to come up with this very same piece of work. They didn't like that piece of work. And so they literally went, we're going to have to go back out to market to find another agency to do something, sort of a version 2. We were aware of that when we took on the job. And so, part of the way that I deal with any client, and particularly the client that had just had that experience, was to go, okay, we're going to be working on this strategy. We're going to check in with you absolutely very regularly right along the way so that you're absolutely completely across what we're wanting to do. So, that's doing a draft indicative sort of strategy overview, which is like a sort of an executive summary or a sort of almost like an essay plan of the strategy, getting ticks on that. That's great to proceed. Then working up a section to test language, that's great. Moving forward to other modules, et cetera, et cetera. And so having very regular meetings with them so that they're absolutely, we're very happy and very on top of what we were doing. And I think for them, that was a great way of them being able to get the most out of us. But for us, that was the best way of making sure that at the end of that process, when they got the 250-page document, that it's what they wanted and they could use it.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that I think government agencies and departments are probably, if you think about their own culture, they have very much a culture of, that's gone over to that person on that desk and that will be coming back to me in 5 days because that's on the spreadsheet. And so, so it's quite deliverable driven and process driven. And so I think you've got to, as a consultancy, you've got to be able to fit into that culture, that public servant service culture. But as an agency, I think you've also got to go, we want to hear from you. We're asking you for your creativity. We're asking you to test us. And so, for that particular strategy, and I'm not going to go into details about what that was, we came up with some really, really interesting, slightly out there suggestions, because it was going to be an ad campaign as part of it. And, bringing in all sorts of different organisations and companies as part of that ad campaign. And they really loved them. Like, they loved the ideas. Now, they didn't all happen, but they loved the ideas. And I think it's about saying, we want your creativity, but from the consultant's point of view, we need to work within the structures that we know are there. So there are limitations as a consultant, but I think as an agency, you've almost got to say, we want to have this blue sky from you. We want to have that creativity from you. But at the same time, you can't go too crazy, because they'll go, right, okay, you're all a bit out there. So you got to sort of tame that down a bit, within some boundaries. But you can do that, I think.
What's your views on disruption and digital disruption, and in this particular part of the world where essentially the factors of media production and distribution have now been democratised, and every government agency, department, etc., can now be a media company. They can create their own video, audio, stills, text and graphics, and there's multiple channels, both offline and online, to distribute that particular information, and also the ability to measure, the impact of that particular content creation and distribution. How well do you think government agencies are taking up that opportunity?
Well, I think some of them are taking it up better than others. Some of them are very sort of still contemplating their navels and not really doing much about it. I think they know they've got to do something, but if you look at their social media platforms and their social media feeds, they're very linear and not creative at all. They're not particularly engaged. They're quite flat, and they sort of deliver parcels of information, but there's not a lot of energy in the delivery. There are some departments who are doing it really well and integrating some of the things that they do into some really exciting content. There's sort of all sorts of, some of those have a very good reason to do so, because they've got a lot of public interface, and so they've been driven to do it a little bit earlier than perhaps some of the others. But there are some of them who still, have got a lot of work to do, I think. It's absolutely imperative that they do it. And, there are, if you looked at every agency, they'll all be online, but you'll have vastly different quality of content from them all. And I think they could absolutely do it a lot better. And there are I've worked with an agency in the last year or so, creating a film for them and a whole lot of visual tools to be able to promote some of the work that they were doing. And that was absolutely marvellous. Again, I worked with another agency creating a really evocative document that they did to talk about the work that they did all over Australia in the space they're in. And it was beautiful. It was done photographically. We went out and wherever they were working, they had a huge array of different services that they provided. They're in the sort of infrastructure transport space. And, it was a fantastic document because it was sort of words meets the visual. And it was a beautiful document. So there are some of them that go, we're prepared to be tested, we're prepared to try, and we're prepared to sort of go places that we haven't been before. But then there are others who go, all we need is we just need a set of fact sheets and it'll be okay, and I think we've certainly moved beyond just having a set of fact sheets that are in the reception area. We need to have much more than that from government departments. They need to be responsive. they need, and I'm sure a lot of them are doing it very well, they need to be able to be responsive to online criticism, online engagement. They know that. And, I think many of them are doing it well, but some of them I think have got a bit of a way to go.
So just in terms of your agency and the way you run it, as we sort of come towards the end of our chat today, just this notion of a virtual agency, where did you get the idea, and can you just take us on the journey from where it started to where it is now, and perhaps about what are some of the challenges and what are some of the good things about operating a virtual agency?
Sure. Well, when I wrote a book, co-authored a book with Melissa Doyle from Channel 7 about 7 years ago called The Working Mother's Survival Guide. And when we were writing the book, one of the things that it was a practical guide for working mums about transitioning from work to being a mum to back to work. And one of the things that we very quickly discovered that one of the biggest issues for mums and work was the lack of real flexible working workplaces. So, when I had the opportunity to open my own agency, I promised myself that I wanted to make that as flexible as I wanted myself. So when I created the company, it was basically so I could drop my kids off at school and pick them up from school, be available to take them to school sport, be available to be at home with them, most of the time or a lot of the time for homework. Now, I'm not saying that I do that all the time, that as I say, there's the old saying that you need a village to bring up a child, and I reckon we need at least 2.5 to bring up our children. But I've got a lot of very good families that are helping us if we ever need, and we reciprocate, obviously. But I wanted to do that. I wanted to create a flexible environment. So when I started and I was working from where we live, which is a country property just outside of the capital, Canberra, I began that with no real plan to expand it to, global, sort of heights. But quite quickly, we developed a client base, and we went from strength to strength. And it was just easy. I employed a bunch of people who were happy to work where they were. There was no real reason for us to take on an office. An office was really just an indulgence that we didn't need, a bit like, upgrading from your ute to a Maserati, or, maybe something a bit less than that. But, you don't need something flash, because essentially with the sort of work we do creatively, we can be anywhere. And when we meet clients, we can meet them in a range of places, usually in their own offices. So, you actually don't need an office. The thing, you mentioned what's the limitations for us. I suppose for us, we have a lot of staff online discussions. We have a lot of staff meetings that are on the phone. We use a lot of collaborative tools that are online platforms like Basecamp and other online tools, and they all work really well. I've never had an issue with any of that in terms of what the staff's doing and not doing. That's not an issue. I think probably the thing that you do miss is just having someone in the room with you. And so what we've started in the last little while is people working in co-working spaces. So we have a lot of interns, so we'll allow the interns to work in a co-working space. We'll have the staff in whatever city, because they're spread all over Australia. There's 10 of us. And, they can pop in and be in there if they want. So we've adopted sort of even more flexibility, if you like. You don't have to be working at home. You can work at a coffee shop, or you can work at a co-working space as well. One of the great advantages actually of not working in an office is that we don't get sick. Actually, we don't get as much colds and flu which is interesting. And I think obviously I don't sit here and never go out. I go out pretty much most days to meetings, but because I'm not sitting in an office with an air conditioning system, most of the staff are finding the same thing, that we just aren't getting the levels of cold and flu that we might have got when we were working in offices previously. So that's an interesting, positive spin-off, I think.
It certainly, and it is going to increasingly go that way, isn't it? People are going to be demanding that they're going to demand exactly that flexibility that you're talking about. Everyone's going to want to stay off the roads, stay out of the traffic jams, and if people can deliver their work to a acceptable standard or to a high standard, why not draw them from wherever they might rest or wherever they live?
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of our clients are not-for-profits and organisations and government agencies. So, for them, they don't want to spend, huge amounts of budgets if they don't have to. So, if we can cut corners in a budget sense by saying we don't have the overheads of an office, of the rent of an office each month, and the costs that come with that, then that's a good thing. I mean, all my staff are being paid well over the award wage. They all get a whole lot of other benefits. They have complete flexibility to pretty much do and work whenever they feel like it. Yes, they have to be on a staff client call, but apart from that, they've got complete flexibility to work when they want. And that's a very rare thing, I think, in a workplace, that you can really do the work when you feel like it or when it suits you. So in fact, all our staff are women. There's nothing. I've got nothing personal against men. I'm married to one, but indeed, it's worked that way because I think that women are attracted to being available to do the things that I want to do, which is I want to drop my 10-year-old at school at 8:45. So if someone says to me, "Can you be at meeting at 9?" I go, "Actually, I can see you at 9:30," and I don't need to explain why, and nor do my staff. So, and I'll always respect their availability if they're not available because of whatever reason, So I think that's a pretty unique workplace, and at the same time, you get to do some really interesting creative work on really good projects. So it's a pretty good combination, I think.
Well, congratulations on all of your success and certainly that innovation and obviously your reputation and the results that you've been getting through 50 Acres. Fantastic for the clients, great for the industry, and may I wish you all the success in the world. Where might people be able to get in contact with you if they want to have a chat about a particular project or even maybe find out a little bit more about how this virtual thing works?
Sure. Our website is www.50acres, that's FIFTYACRES.com. And my email address is J-O, at 50acres, that's FIFTYACRES.com.
Joe, thank you very much for spending some of your valuable time today here in Transition and some great advice there, everyone. Going back to just some of that strategic thinking that Joe does when she engages with her clients up front. And for you government agencies out there, when you are going to engage a consultant, be clear, be strategic, and then be available. Don't just think the consultant's going to be able to read your mind and know everything. Get those conversations, sit down, talk, get it together, and then get that clarity. Because once you get the clarity, talented people like Joe and a team can get in and solve the problems for you. Because as content marketing, it's all about you do have the ability to connect to the people who are there for you to achieve your business objectives. So everybody's on the grid. It is content that will create that connection. So get some smart people working with you to solve those problems. Thanks once again to Joe Scard. Great insights. And I really love the innovation around that virtual offices. And I know lots of people will be thinking about how can we enjoy this wonderful life that we all have and do it in a way where we're not tied to a desk. So Joe, thanks very much to you for being on In Transition once again. Thanks very much to all of you, wherever you are listening anywhere in this beautiful, wonderful, wide world of ours. We'll be back next week with another fantastic guest. Have a great week.
You've been listening to In Transition, the program dedicated to the practice of content marketing in government. For more, visit us at intransitionpodcast.com.au.